Hi friends, host Eric here, talking with fence people. Let's try this again. My second take of this video. Right now represents a chapter transition for me. And it represents chapter transition in a lot of ways. My dad's always kind of shaking his head at me and been a little bit of, I think I'd say a bit of a disappointment. But, one of the issues with dealing with people who use a lot of SI, as my dad does, is they've got to experience things, especially if they're anti-polar, before they believe them. So, there was a period of my life when I was not a very good son because I was a drunk, and it's been 5 years since I quit drinking. But, anti-polar means, in some sense, not quite getting the ultimate realities of things, what they collapse down into. I don't think he really understood that the problem for me was the alcohol, not some character flaw. And I think he's starting to learn that now. I spoke with my cousins on the phone yesterday for the first time in many years. I've spoken to either of them. And, my dad set that up and he wanted me to be available to take the call and talk to him and stuff. And I was excited to do so, frankly. Of course, I forgot all about it, but I was fortunate enough to answer the phone when he called. And as I do whenever I have my phone with me, I was able to talk to my cousins. And see, that's the sort of thing that my dad will just shake his head at and just be like, see, you're not reliable. But the reality is, he's starting to understand that I am very reliable. I'm also me, which means I'm a little chaotic. But that doesn't mean that I can't be counted on for important things. And I certainly can. Time with my mom has been very rewarding and remarkably easy. It says something about expectations as well. I came expecting things to be more difficult than they are, and not really understanding how straightforward the process can become when you've got things set up properly. It's the TE thing. Mom's not concerned or whatever because she's in her natural environment. I got her up in the morning and got her changed out of wet clothes and into the bath and did all the laundry of the bed sheets and stuff. But that doesn't bother me at all because I fully expected us to do that. My experience caring for her during the week, when I come over here, pick her up and take her back to my house and try to do some things that I normally do and also care for her, that's much more difficult. This has been easy and pleasant and great, and it's gotten me some insights into FI and FE, I guess. The other night, I don't ever leave her alone for more than about 5 minutes. It's like if she's out of the room for a while, out of my sight or hearing, or I have no idea where she is. If she's in her room's area or the back there, then it's pretty mom-proofed, and so it's pretty much fine. And she'll make a sound if she's in distress or something. The other night I left her in the bathroom. She was sitting on the side of the bathtub, which is it's like a big square bathtub. It's not like a regular bathtub. Anyway, she was just messing with something. I don't know. She was getting ready for bed, and I said, okay, well, Mom, if you just want to sit in here for a bit, that's fine. Well, I walked out, and as I'm walking back into here, I hear this sound, and I go in there, and she's falling over backwards. Not into the bathtub all the way, but she's like planking, basically. And that was very distressing for her. And so, I got her up, and she was quite discombobulated by the whole experience and quite upset. And I had a chance to, reassure her and be comforting and do everything right or whatever. And it was It was very tender or something. I don't know. It was very FI. And then I remember thinking, Eric, you don't even get any credit for this. Like, reading FE third slide, I just think to myself, like, who are you doing this for? And, there's nobody here to see. Mom's not going to remember. And I realize, I'm doing it for her because I care about her. And because I owe her, it's like... And because I guess I don't want to live with the reality of not having fulfilled my filial duty. Is that the word, filial? I think so. Anyway, that's FI and FE. It makes making videos right now difficult for me because my NE gets completely lost when I start going in with an FI understanding of things at all. I'm not equipped to use NE and FI together. And so it causes me to sort of break down mentally. Like, being FI polar means that my attention almost always is not sullied by a lot of emotional experiences. Which is to say, I'm not fixated on something that's important to me on some level so that I can try out lots of different things all the time. Or at least that which is important to me is a platform which allows me to do lots of different things that also, it's basically YouTube, So, another factor of this chapter is limited Kim time, being away from Kim mostly for the week. I saw her a little bit yesterday, and I might see her today, I might not. It's interesting. I miss her, and life's easy in some sense because I'm not dealing with that stuff. I'm not dealing with the complications of that. But at the same time, I feel like I'm not, I don't know. It's hard to say. It's a feeling of like, who knows what feelings are, but it's a feeling of that, of a lack of completeness in some regard, or lack of wholeness, and being separated from her. But there's also a sense of, this is kind of nice to have a break. This is really the first time we spent meaningfully apart from each other, like overnights and stuff, since we got together, really. I think we can probably both use time apart, and I think that it's going to be good for us. Weather. I tend to mark chapter changes, and I see this as a chapter change rather than it just like a week-long chapter in itself, but marking a chapter change. I tend to link them to weather events. Like last night it was super windy around here, just like windy as hell. The shit was blowing all over the place. And a lot of times when there's a chapter transition, I think this tends to be a big storm or lightning or something like that. So that's a little magical thinking for you. Number 2, ISF. One of the things that's been dominating my thoughts a lot of late is ISF. And just to give you a quick overview in case you missed the ISF video, it divides itself into 2 kinds of self: true self and parts of the self. True self is always responding with either compassion, acceptance, or curiosity. The parts of the self respond in ways other than that. Now, what this basically is a framework to explain the nature of behavior. And it says that when people behave without curiosity, acceptance, or compassion, then they fail to reflect their true self, but instead they're protectors of their firefighters. Elements of themselves that have their best interest in mind, but don't necessarily execute procedures that serve the interests of the self. An example is a firefighter would be like, you have a lot of bad feelings or whatever, and at a certain point it reaches a tipping point where you don't want to deal with it anymore, and so you go, fuck it, I'm going to go out and get drunk. A manager is more like somebody who checks you check yourself. So it's like, hold on a second here, Eric, are you sure you're right about this? Or now, Eric, you need to look at this. And these are all TI examples, but there are other ways you can check yourself with TI, I'm sure. But, like people who have a lot of damage will say, or who are expressing their damage, regardless of how much they have, will say things like, I'm a worthless piece of shit, and stuff like that, They will feel bad about themselves. And that's a way to punish yourself for your true understanding of how you'd like yourself to be, which is to say, compassionate, curious, and accepting. The idea that it's possible to ever be just compassionate, curious, or accepting about the things that happen to you that run afoul of your own expectations is almost seems to me a bridge between Zen and Western thinking. Because instead of saying, don't be attached, it says that acceptance is the right response to loss. And acceptance, of course, is what happens after a loss has been processed and understood and grieved, I guess. And then the suffering is no longer active once the reality's been fully accepted. There's nothing left to suffer about. The suffering comes from the differentiation between expectations and reality in some regard. Of course, this doesn't really withstand any TI scrutiny, because there's no justification for why the true self ought to be compassionate, accepting, and curious, while other parts of the self be somehow less true. Is it not true when I'm angry? It seems true to me. You can just tear it apart with TI in a second. That's because the central value being always upheld by TI is honesty. And honesty is predicated on the notion of communicative universality. That I can say a sentence, then you'll know what I mean, and I know what I mean. And so we can determine whether you're being deceptive or just made a mistake. If I go, where were you last night? And you go, I went to this place last night with Steve. I forget what it's called. I think it was called Tom Stevens or something. Tom Stevens Pub, I think. But you are actually remembering the place next door's name. And you're probably not lying. That's probably an honest mistake. But we rely on that, being able to make that distinction, we assume that people understand words to mean basically the same thing, what they mean, and that words are an effective way of communicating information, because because the various agents involved have the same language. The TE value is faith. It's faith in a process to produce a result. That's always implicit in TE. That if you execute something correctly, you'll get the result you expect. That you can predict your capacity to successfully change a current reality if you give it sufficient attention and will. You can see lots of people with probably excellent TE having this thing impact them negatively when they have too much faith that they can solve a given problem with sufficient follow through and execution and sufficient attention to how to do it, right? There's this guy who had this invention for these bionic shoes or something. I don't know. You probably find an article about him on the internet. And his story is fascinating because he's obviously an excellent engineer, and he's spent his whole life and time and attention and stuff on developing and upgrading and making better and making prototypes of this idea he had very young on about these. Like in childhood he had it, and he began working on it, and he's been working on it ever since. This bionic shoes guy. But basically it's shoes with springs in them that amplify your natural running ability such that you can run further, faster with them than without them. In other words, they're a I don't know what you call that. There's a word for it. A turbine? No. A thing that converts, that ratchets up the amount of impact in a given vector that the same amount of power produces. So it's like when you exert yourself running with shoes on, then regular shoes on, then you're directing a certain amount of energy, and that energy is producing a certain amount of going forward. But when you are, can you tell how difficult it is for me to do this right now? I can't. I'm having so much trouble staying on topic in my own head as I'm going through this, even with the outline. And I can only attribute that to too much FI in the air. I just, as a machine, I don't operate very well when damp. Anyway, I guess the point is that, what was I saying about a second ago? I was trying to explain something. Oh, about the running the shoes thing. Yeah. Well, you guys probably get the idea. I'm not sure. I'm curious about the physics of that. I guess it's like if you direct the energy into the spring, I guess it's taking better advantage of gravity. Is that where it gets the extra energy from on the way out? Because it's curious to imagine that the same amount of energy in produces so much more energy out one way or the other. But of course, that's the nature of physical systems, is they allow that to occur. You know, that's why leverage works. If you put the same amount of force over here, I guess that's what it's called, leverage of some sort. I don't know. Regardless, you know what I'm talking about. So, self-development and life development. Oh, larger questions. The larger questions posed by ISF to me are ones of teleology that's implied by descriptive limits. If you use that three-pronged attack of ISF and say, okay, well, there's compassion, acceptance, and curiosity that are true expressions of self, and the things, I guess, lacking in those, but it would have to be things other than that. Now, it would be I guess, illegitimate in some sense. Now, keep in mind, this is designed as a rhetorical framework to be used specifically to solve attachment issues. Or in other words, to enable individuals with insecure attachment style to have more direct, to have their true self, or a calm, compassionate, relaxed, trusting self captaining the ship of self, and to have the protectors, namely the manager and the managers and the firefighters, to play their appropriate role. And there is an appropriate role for each to play, obviously. So then, the larger questions are, I guess, is it the case that humans are fundamentally compassionate, accepting, and curious creatures? And things that, I guess, contradict that in some sense are expressions of a defense that is an instrumental part of self rather than an absolute part of self. Well, that's where we go back to the TI question. Does this withstand any TI scrutiny? No. But it's an interesting prescription for approaching one's own moral agency. Having heard this thing, it's hard for me now to forget that, and I find myself having faith in this notion that my best self is those things, and may express those things in a variety of ways. Now, obviously, if I'm making a joke and making somebody laugh, I don't think that's compassionate, accepting, or curious. I think that's something else, right? And that's totally okay. If I'm laughing at somebody else's joke, I don't think that's accepting, curious, or compassionate. I just think that's my actual amusement at something, and that's totally okay. There's just a couple examples. If I'm mad at somebody who's transgressed in some regard, violated some fundamental principle, then my anger is an appropriate response. And that's where things get really tricky on a TI level, because I don't want to be saying, and I don't feel like it's appropriate to say, that all aspects of myself that are somehow not compassionate, accepting, and or curious are false. So I guess what that boils down to is I need to, she's going into the part of the kitchen where she gets into trouble. I need to acknowledge, I guess I will. What you doing, Mom?
I'll be in a minute.
Okay.
I'll just put this in there and then I'll come in.
Okay.
Well,
So, but, you know, the thing is, I also recognize that what this sort of implies is an external self that relates to the world and an internal self that exists in the world. And it's sort of a false dichotomy, of course, but would you like more coffee?
no. That's what I'm trying. This is going to stay down.
It's empty right now, your cup.
Yes.
Would you like more coffee?
Well, anyway, here this.
I will refill it for you.
Okay.
Okay. That's perfectly under. I'll get that. Don't worry about it.
Well, I could make it a lot worse if we let the cat here.
We don't have a cat. Or not here, we don't.
Yeah. Because all the strange ones of your place here, they all like to do things.
All the strange ones at my place here like to do things. I agree. Okay. Mommy. Here's your coffee. Stir it up real good. Where do you want it? Right here?
Yeah.
Alright, there it is.
Okay. Is it still cold outside or is it hot?
What?
I said,
It's warm enough outside.
that's what I figured.
Well, there's your coffee over there, Mom.
Oh, okay.
Oh, right here.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
You want to drink it?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's for you.
What's for me?
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. I'd like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to drink it over here?
It doesn't matter. I'll just take you wherever I was going.
Here.
Oh, that looks nice.
Okay. So
This is really good.
I'm glad it's really good.
It doesn't have bad things or no.
No, it has no bad things. It's bad thing free. And this is the sort of reality I'm dealing with, which is, you know, it's. Let me talk about this thing in this video and make a separate video on 3 and 4. So it's a tricky decision all the time as to how to manage the balance between respecting her autonomous will on things and doing what's best. You know, this morning when she woke up and we were in her room, and she was getting out of bed, you know, I needed to get her to give me a wet shirt and get off her wet under things, and she didn't want to take anything of that stuff off. So, you know, it's like I sort of stand there and ask again and again, hey Mom, can you well, you know, I've learned that I can cut the bottom thing off real quick, and then it's like I don't have to fight with her about it. The shirt, I just took an alternate approach of filling up the bath and getting her to get into the bath, wanting to go into the bath, and then she naturally takes off her shirt finally and gives me the wet shirt, because, you know, we're at the point where she doesn't sleep through the night. She doesn't get up during the night to pee and stuff, so you know. And of course, there's always complications. Like, I set up the side of the bed for her that she usually sleeps on, and then, of course, she gets up in the middle of the night and switches sides of the bed. So I guess I'll just set up the whole bed from now on. But she uses a lot of those absorbent things. But
the people that are here, we've been having this thing between the animals, and the ones some down there. We've got more than you've got.
They've got more animals than we've got. Okay.
But anyway, we knew very much because I've known the owner of this in ages.
Yeah, that's Delilah owns that cat.
But she's always by, and at nighttime, all of them come and they run, here's ours, but nobody said anything.
Oh, okay.
But this poor little thing, somebody said, well, don't you want to kill it? I said, no.
Nobody said that, Paul. Nobody said that. No.
I don't know
This
who
was
it was.
this
I
was
don't
Dixie.
know everybody's names, and I didn't even ask to get.
That was the picture Delilah took of Dixie when she was little. Okay.
She even came by herself to go with us.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is the sort of thing I'm dealing with in terms of autonomy versus, you know, reality. It's like her reality is clear. She's always making clear to me when she's not happy with something. So when I try to say, come on, Mom, let's take this shirt off, and I try to give a little tug myself, she's not having it, you know. No. So I just respect that and try to figure out a way around it. But there obviously are going to be times when I just can't respect her feelings. If she wants to leave on, like, you know, a wet diaper or something, I can't respect that. You got to do what's best for her, not in that instance, not what she wants. And that's a tricky thing to balance. And I think it's a tricky thing to balance in life in general. One of the first things Taylor told me that I think I learned a lot from was him talking to me about how in a lot of instances, I respect people's autonomy too much, that a lot of people want, to some extent, simply to be told what to do and or what the answer is, and they don't necessarily want to be as fully informed about everything as I necessarily want them to be in making decisions. So that's a reality too. It's like there are some areas where each of us want full empowerment, and some areas where each of us don't mind delegating. And I need to remember, and I don't need to so much now. I understand things a little bit more clearly than I did then. But it was one of the things I learned from him. And here's the borderland where you gotta wrestle with those realities, and it, I don't know, teaches you something about life or whatever. This video is pretty long and rambly, but I think I'm just gonna upload it. I think it probably looks pretty good, and although it might be small too because of the way this thing is. I don't know. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese.